Throughout our lives, there are a select few games that speak to us. Experiences that, for whatever reason, are more fun, poignant, and memorable than all the others. And it's these types of games that I think everyone needs to try at least once. So as someone who has played and loved a lot of different types of titles from every genre out there, today I've handpicked and curated only the best of the best. From small and beautiful indie darlings to AAA adventures that will psychologically ruin you. Here is every single video game you owe it to yourself to play before you die. Few games are as amazing all around as Clair Obscur Expedition 33. And for that reason, it's the very first game I need to talk about when considering the titles everyone needs to play before they die. The type of game which reminds us all just how beautiful this medium and art form can really be. To start, the narrative itself tells a tragically beautiful tale of a family suffering from loss, and of a team of expeditioners who are sent across the sea to stop a cosmic deity known as the Paintress, a woman who is killing large swaths of the population in the city of Lumiere every year. You see, starting at 100 and working her way down, each year the Paintress lowers the number on a giant rock by 1, and anyone over the age shown is swiftly turned into dust and never seen again. This results in countless families being torn apart, orphans being thrust into the streets, and the wisest of the community by the time we play not even making it into their mid-30s. So the expedition's main goal is to end this horrific cycle, and finally let the strange world that they live in rest in peace. It's a fascinating premise for a game in its own right, and one that hooked me almost immediately. But further in, more and more twists reveal themselves to you, which spin this narrative on its head even more. It's without a doubt one of the best main stories I've experienced in a game, well, ever. It's raw, gritty, philosophical, and even sentimental at times, with voice acting and performances that make you actually feel something. In cutscenes, characters talk over one another, fight and reminisce alike, and more than anything, genuinely come across like real human beings with genuine emotion. A lot of people don't know this, but the main writer for Expedition 33 wasn't even a writer by trade before either, rather being in finance like myself for her full-time job, and it goes to show that passion always trumps experience. And speaking of passion, it practically oozes off the screen when you play this game. Every fight is cinematic, every scene meticulously crafted with beautiful art, every boss unique and interesting, and even the combat itself in-game shows a level of love and care few studios even attempt to reach. The build crafting and RPG systems with the Pictos and Luminas are deep and complex as well, allowing for countless different and interesting ways to play that all feel unique and worthwhile. No party member has the same movesets or style, and it keeps things fresh. And honestly, I've never been a huge fan of JRPGs in general, but this game is so good that it shattered all my preconceived notions and showed me how great this style of game can be too. But more than any of that, any of the awesome and fun gameplay or cool mystery, it's how this game makes you feel that matters the most. Because at the end of the day, the games we should all play before we die, in my opinion at least, primarily stem from experiences that make our souls come alive. The types that are so memorable they make us reflect on our own lives or fall in love with the setting. And well, Expedition 33 is one of those games. A game that will make you love, laugh, and even cry, keeping you guessing until the very last moment with one of the best endings to a video game I have ever played in my life. And despite how hard the combat can be at times too, it's the type of title that everyone should play before they die because it shows how great games can be when there is so much passion behind it. There's a soul on offer here, art, a team that chose to make what they truly love rather than checking off a list of things that were needed to make money or molding something from the minds of random playtesters that just make things worse most of the time. You don't need a dedicated team of 300 developers to make something this special in our modern era. And because of that, despite popular arguments, games have never been as good as they are right now. There is more variety and quality nowadays than ever before. More titles that you can play that will leave a lasting effect on you than any previous time in history. Small teams like Sandfall Interactive, the minds behind Expedition 33, can now rival what before would have taken an army. And I'll say it again, passion always trumps mastery and manpower. Some of the key leadership and developers on this game didn't even know how to use Unreal Engine 5 before they started. What's your excuse? Trust me when I say this, go into this game blind, don't look at any reviews or any spoilers at all, simply jump in and enjoy and thank me later. It will prove to you why games nowadays are great and why anyone arguing otherwise is mad at the world and themselves and not the modern gaming industry, because they're failing to see what's right in front of them right now. And in terms of games like this, both new and old, we have a lot more where that came from, including the single most important game you can play before you die, coming up later on this list. When talking about games that everyone needs to play before they die, one of the first thoughts that comes to my head, and I'm sure many of you as well, is Portal 2. Built during the heyday of Valve, Portal as a series is instrumental not only due to the fact that it's so accessible to a wide range of audiences, but because it's just one of the best games ever made, full stop. I distinctly remember my first time playing it as a young kid and being amazed at just how fun and funny it was. Every level brings new challenges and obstacles, with puzzles that force you to think, but nothing so overbearing the fun is ever lost. And I've always been a sucker for these types of games anyways, which is why I love more recent things as well, like the Talos Principle and its sequel. But Portal truly is in a league of its own when it comes to the presentation. Characters like Wheatley and GLaDOS are so memorable because they're funny, witty, and tragic, written in a way where every moment they are on screen is a joy. In fact, even within minutes of booting this game up, you will be treated to Wheatley's hilarious mannerisms as an entire room opens up before you in a dazzling spectacle and you are let loose on the world. Because you see, Portal first and foremost is just fun. It's a game centered around the idea of having a good time, solving different puzzle rooms, and talking to fun characters while you piece together the mysteries of Aperture Laboratories. And even to this day, with no updates to this game for decades, it still manages to be far and away one of the most enjoyable experiences in gaming. And also, it's the type of game that really anyone can enjoy. Someone who has never even played a game before could sit down and within an hour fall in love with Portal. And when you add on the fact that this installment has couch co-op as well, you realize how instrumental this title must have been in a lot of people falling in love with the medium. I love other co-op games too, like Split Fiction or It Takes Two, but something about Portal 2's simplicity, those endless white walls or concrete jungles, those simple blue and orange portals, the hilarious writing, it all comes together into a package that was revolutionary for its time, and even so many years later, stands tall amongst the giants that have come after. There's a reason Portal 2 is one of the highest rated games of all time. One of the few where almost every system comes together perfectly to craft an ensemble that sings while you play. Even talking about it here, I think back to some of my favorite levels in the game where you have to use acceleration to make long jumps, or time where you place your portals to move objects in 3D space. Just so many cool ideas and puzzles that will make you feel good after solving them and never outstaying their welcome, constantly building upon one another as you go from one level to the next. Pure fun. Something I think most gamers are looking for, but it sometimes can be so hard to find. So if you haven't already, I promise you, playing Portal 2 will be well worth your time. For any of you who have listened to me talk about video games before, you know that my favorite genre is far and away science fiction. But in terms of deep and lore-heavy sci-fi games, sadly, not many titles have even attempted to create something special. However, luckily for us, there is one game series that showed just how amazing sci-fi in games can be, telling one of the most gripping stories in games history that everyone needs to play before they die: the Mass Effect trilogy. Set over 100 years into our future, shortly after humanity's first contact with alien species and the discovery of grand civilizations spanning across the Milky Way, the story of these 3 games follows Commander Shepard, a man thrust into the middle of a massive conspiracy that quite literally affects all of history, and more importantly, the future. It's a science fiction lover's dream come true, full of dozens of complex and interesting new alien races, mega structures like the Citadel where we can walk around and simply learn more about the universe, and galactic-level space battles that put even modern big-budget movies and television to shame. And on top of all of this, one of the best parts about the series is strangely the Codex. Anything and everything you discover out in the world. Every new species or technology has an entire multi-paragraph long entry, read aloud by voice actor Neil Ross with his unmistakably booming tone. It adds so much flavor to the world and its history, giving us a chance to dive into the lore of other peoples and races, wars that spanned for decades, and technology that changed society forever. Even walking up to bars or shops in games is a visceral experience, where you will feel like you are in a real place. One that makes sense, with racism, murder, and all the darkness that comes along with humanity as well, while also making things so much more interesting both politically and socially. For example, in the game The Krogan, a race of giant brutish lizards that love war, are on the verge of extinction. At the hands of the Solarians, they have been infected with a genophage, an ancient disease which limits their ability to breed, slowly killing their people and culture. Originally, the genophage was unleashed on the Krogan after they saved the galaxy from a prehistoric enemy known as the Rachni, which almost took over all known worlds at one point. But in the wake of their victory, a power vacuum was left for the Krogan to usurp, and fearing their military might, the Solarians, with their mastery of technology, knew that only by creating a contagion could they keep them in check. Stories and lore like this are what make Mass Effect as a series so great and memorable. And one of the best parts about it all is in each of the games from the trilogy, we can directly affect this story as it happens. Choices you make in the first game carry over to the second and third, and by the end of the series, you will quite literally be deciding the fates of entire races in the universe. The stakes are as high as things can get, where it feels like every mission either has a big emotional payoff or a huge story or lore reveal that make them such a joy to actually go on. And I cannot express just how amazing a first-time experience playing this trilogy really is. Each of the 3 games is unique and fun in their own way. The first has the best lore and world building by far, with combat that feels janky but is hilariously fun playing as a biotic, essentially the Force users of this universe. Mass Effect 2, in my opinion by far the worst of the 3, is actually most people's favorite, with the biggest cast of characters and an ending to this day that is one of the best in gaming history. And the third game, for all the flack it gets for its own ending, in my opinion has almost all the best moments and most interesting choices in the whole series, with some cutscenes that I even now a decade later still think about. There really is no bad game in the original trilogy. All of them are amazing in their own way, and all of them have dozens of hours of fresh and interesting content in one of the most well-realized places in fiction, well, ever. Trust me, as someone that loves science fiction, I've read a ton of books, watched a lot of shows, and played a lot of games. The Foundation series, Culture, Dune, The Expanse, and one of my personal recent favorites, Exodus, maybe my favorite sci-fi book of all time, which has a game coming out next year, ironically made by the original people who dreamt up Mass Effect. But even amongst all the titans of this genre, Mass Effect sits right on the throne with them. A universe full of interesting ideas, philosophies, cultures, and stories to tell that will stick with you for a lifetime. If you can't tell, I could literally go on for hours about why Mass Effect is so special. But a lot of those reasons would require spoilers too, about a main story that I think is one of the coolest ever conceived in a video game. So for now, all I can say is that if you have not played the Mass Effect trilogy yet, go back and get the remastered Legendary Edition with updated graphics and gameplay, and get ready to experience one of the best things this medium has ever made. The type of games that everyone must play before they die. If you ask most people what the best FPS campaign in games of all time was, they probably would say something like Call of Duty Modern Warfare 1 or 2, or maybe even Halo 3. a personal favorite of mine. But while both these games are amazing in their own right, practically raising me as a kid with the amount of time I spent in them, there actually is one other FPS campaign that I think is even better than all of them. An experience so good that everyone owes it to themselves to try it at least once before they die. Titanfall 2. It's a campaign that can be beaten in as little as 4 hours, but within this short time frame is wall-to-wall action, set pieces, and spectacle. There literally is not a single moment in this short main story where I was not having fun. Every single mission is unique and interesting, every firefight engaging, and on top of all of this, Titanfall 2 has one of, if not the single greatest movement system in a game ever made, where with enough skill you can wall run and climb across massive distances in seconds. And whenever you're in a mech, you will unlock a variety of abilities that help you traverse and kill as well. But even more than any of that, it's what happens in some of these missions makes me remember this game so fondly. In one specific one, you have to parkour your way up a shifting building in real time. In another, you must fight in midair during a ship battle. And potentially most impressive, an entire sequence dedicated to time travel where you can shift between reality on the fly as you shoot and move. It really feels like the designers behind Titanfall 2 said yes to everything that sounded cool, and somehow managed to combine it all into one cohesive package that feels right. And you know, I've always argued that in games, there's often too much filler. Nowadays, every other title wants to be an open world with side quests and objectives. But oftentimes, these objectives are nothing more than half-assed storytelling and time wasting, with no huge payoff in terms of gameplay or lore. In Titanfall 2's case, though, it is the antithesis to this, and it couldn't be any further from the truth. Where rather, it seems like anything that wasn't immensely fun in the moment was cut, and what we're left with instead is wall-to-wall joy throughout. I've seen a lot of people online argue that $60, $70, $80 for a game that only lasts 4 hours like Titanfall 2 is never worth it, because they wouldn't think they got their money's worth for that price. But for me, it's all about quality over quantity. Those 4 hours in the campaign of Titanfall 2 are so good, so much better than the competition, that I really do think it's worth it. Would you rather spend 100 hours in the most recent Assassin's Creed only to realize that essentially you wasted all that time? Or would you rather spend 4 hours in Titanfall 2 with an experience that will last with you for years? If you ask me, the latter would be a much better spend of $80 than the former. And that's why I think everyone should play this game. It shows perfectly why less is more, why a focus on quality over quantity can be so beneficial, and more than anything, just how badass and awesome the Titanfall series is, and why we desperately need another. The combat is crisp, the movement is exhilarating, and the characters endearing, all in a package that you can get right now and beat in an afternoon. If you haven't already, do yourself a favor and dedicate just one day to this amazing campaign that in 4 hours can leave a mark that lasts with you forever. There's a reason immersive sims and RPGs are my favorite genres in video games. I find their complexity and systems-driven design to be infinitely more interesting than most other genres, and it's why I'm such a fan of the recent movement of making every single game have RPG or immersive sim-light elements. So it comes as no surprise that a game that masterfully combines both into potentially the greatest RPG ever created is yet another game I think everyone must play before they die. Baldur's Gate 3. First and foremost, this title lives and breathes reactivity. Every choice you make, no matter how big and small, can have drastic effects on the world around you. Choose to be an evil drow with magical powers? The goblins you encounter early on in Act 1 will be scared of you and let you through without a fight or any trouble at all. Choose to be a whimsical druid that can transform and talk to animals? Well, now hundreds of more options are opened up before you, with dozens of quests that can be solved by talking with and mingling with the local wildlife. But even more impressive, every single one of these encounters is fully voice acted, animated, and considered. I think everyone who plays this game for the first time has that moment in their playthrough where they try something wholly unexpected, the type of interaction that surely the game would not account for, and yet it does. With such a high level of presentation, it's almost astounding. It's the key ingredient that makes Baldur's Gate 3 a generational experience. And when you combine that with a systems-first design approach where every combat encounter and quest can be tackled in infinite ways, using items you pick up or the environment to your advantage, it becomes clear why this title is so beloved. More than any other Dungeons & Dragons adjacent games before it as well, Baldur's Gate 3 really does feel like the tabletop experience, with all the freedom and awe that comes along with it. By the end of it all, you will get the sense that you have been on a genuine journey, where along the way you might have lost party members or made difficult decisions whose ramifications only reveal themselves hours later. It's why I personally recommend, even on a first playthrough, you play on the Honor Mode difficulty setting, one where you are only given one save, and after every action you take, things are automatically overwritten, meaning the stakes become so high. When you know that losing your party member at a key moment in the story or battle could literally mean their loss forever, it makes every moment you experience in-game that much more riveting. But regardless of how you personally choose to play this game, it always finds a way to give back to you. One of my favorite examples of this was on one of my short stints of a playthrough early on, where I chose to be a gnomish mage, shorter than most of the children in the first town. Not only did they make fun of me for this, but more interestingly, it allowed me to fit into a small hidden crevice near the Druid's Grove, which inside was home to a secret organization of conniving children who sought to steal for survival. I was able to walk in, talk to, and befriend the children, and dozens of hours later, find them again in Act 3, getting up to no good. It's stories like these that make Baldur's Gate 3 one of, if not the single greatest RPG ever made. One that really puts the role-playing back in role-playing games. Technically speaking, on any of my other playthroughs, if I got a shrinking spell or potion, I could have also made my way into that cave of thieving 12-year-olds. But it's the fact that something so significant and interesting can be missed that makes it more special. Even the main plot point of Act 1, the Goblin Camp versus the Druid Grove, can be tackled in endless ways. I mentioned before how if you're a drow, you can just walk your way in, as the goblins cower in fear. But what about infiltrating the camp with an invisibility potion and poisoning the drink supply? What about getting yourself locked in jail on purpose and breaking yourself and the druid's leader out? What if you instead side with the goblins and march your way to the grove to butcher innocent people? Or maybe the more traditional routes of talking your way through or going in guns blazing and killing everything in your path. Famously, you can even build a mile-long line of explosive barrels, which you can set off from far away, triggering a chain reaction that kills the entire goblin camp with a single fireball spell. Interactions like this are almost unheard of in most games. Even other RPGs I adore, like say Mass Effect, don't have nearly this level of awareness. In most games, choices simply come down to an A or B affair, a fork in the road where time stops and you get to make a decision in front of a dialogue box. But Baldur's Gate 3 is different. It's a soup of ever-changing decisions that fold against one another, transforming your play session into something you can truly call your own. And honestly, I don't even like the story of Baldur's Gate 3 all that much compared to many other RPGs I adore. And the unrelenting horniness of the characters has always rubbed me the wrong way. It makes them feel fake and artificial rather than real. But despite all of that, at the core of this game is a look into what I wish all RPGs, and really all games, could be. Because the special defining factor of games in the first place is that they can react to our inputs, and I wish more titles took this fact to heart. And speaking of reactivity, the next game everyone should play before they die once again proves how potent that formula really is. I've said it countless times now on this channel, and I'll say it again. 2017's Prey from Arcane Studios, and even more so its DLC Mooncrash, are the most underrated video games of all time. And it goes without saying, must be played by everyone before they die. You see, when Prey was originally released many years ago, it was met with some of the worst review scores for a AAA product, including a 6 from GameSpot and a damning 4 out of 10 from IGN. In gaming, scores like this are essentially a death sentence, and they even initially dissuaded me from trying the game for some time. But to my surprise, when I finally got around to playing this elusive title, I was met with one of the most fascinating and memorable experiences in a game I've ever had. First of all, the introduction to the game, which I won't spoil, is my favorite of all time, no question. It instantly makes you realize what kind of experience you have in store for yourself, that being a psychological masterpiece, and the pacing only increases from there. Built from the ground up as an immersive sim, my favorite genre of games, Prey excels on the premise that every single place and thing you encounter is a sandbox in and of itself. Every location is meticulously designed to allow sneaking, shooting, climbing, hoisting, or hacking. And each gadget or weapon you unlock has multiple uses as well. For example, the glue cannon, which you can find early on, can be used to freeze enemies in place to allow you to land critical melee hits. But it also can be used to craft makeshift bridges that open up entirely new areas even at the start of the game. I remember on my first playthrough, there was an escape pod high on the ceiling of a specific area I was in that was supposed to only be accessible by traveling all around the space station of Talos 1 and finding keys and overriding passwords. But using the glue cannon, I was able to literally spend 30 minutes slowly building a bridge that I climbed through in mid-air to the escape shuttle, which rewarded me with a secret ending dozens of hours before you're even supposed to beat the game. Things like this are what games are all about: exploration, discovery, immersion, and rewards. Finding out that you can actually break the game like this makes it so much more enjoyable because it shows the developers respect your intelligence and allow you to come up with solutions on your own rather than being confined to a linear experience. Another great example of this would be the Huntress Boltcaster, a Nerf-style crossbow that shoots little rubber bullets that barely do any damage. At first glance, this seems pretty useless, but soon you discover that it allows you to shoot through small crevices to hit computer screens as if you're touching them. Meaning if you spend the time and have the patience, you can from many yards away turn on automated defense turrets to kill enemies or unlock doors by hitting a button that's out of your reach. But what if you're out of ammo? Well, with high enough strength, you could rip the door open or move heavy objects to stack them and climb on top. With certain powers, you could even transform yourself into a small cup and roll your way through an opening in the window into an area you want to be. Every single objective in Prey has countless ways to solve it like this. No matter what you choose to upgrade or which stats and weapons you choose to bring into battle, you will know beyond a shadow of a doubt there is always a way to move forward as long as you have what's most important: your mind. And that sense of freedom and immaculate game design gives you a special feeling the entire time you play Prey. A feeling that more games should be like this, designed from the ground up with agency and expression of the player in mind, i.e. immersive sims. But if you thought that was good, then the DLC Mooncrash only takes this formula to even greater heights. And it's so sad that barely anyone has even played this DLC. The DLC adds in a time element, which I sometimes can be apprehensive of in games. Mooncrash takes everything that the base game does and turns it up to 11. There are dozens of new items and obstacles, new enemies, and an entirely unique location with a gameplay loop where you must try and get all of your party members off of a moon base before disaster strikes. Through each run of Mooncrash, you strategize which characters to take into the base in which order, as they must all go in one by one, each taking one of the many escape routes that then is blocked off for all future characters. This means you can, for instance, use the hacker in your initial run through the base, while the timer is still low and enemies are weaker, to unlock all the doors. That way the engineer on your next run can come in and repair a device inside a locked door that after another character can come in and use to escape, in just one example. The mix of meta and transient strategic decisions here are amazing, where if you find good loot on one run, you could save it for all of your future characters. And even if you die during a simulation, you can use the points you have garnered from that run to upgrade and buy equipment for the next run initially. It's such a fascinating and addictive gameplay loop that only gets more and more interesting when you add on the fact that no two runs through the simulation are the same, where one might include a new hidden location that suddenly has been opened up, and another where the power is off when you first arrive and you need to fix it. Each system and mechanic of the game in Mooncrash, even more so than the base game, comes together into a harmonic ensemble that no other games have really managed to recreate for me. And that's not even to mention the amazing lore, graphics, architecture, and mystery that you can find in both Prey and its DLC. This is a science fiction and horror lover's dream come true, all built in a world that rewards you the more you put into it. And really, there are so many more specific things I could point out here as well that prove why Prey is so special. But I think a lot of that magic comes from discovering it for yourself. Discovering how to use your weapons in genius ways, discovering the secrets of what happened on board the space station Talos 1, and discovering why Prey is the single most underrated video game of all time. This game deserves so much more than it got on its initial release. And while a cult following has begun to form for this truly special title, I cannot stress enough how much you need to give it a shot before you die, if you haven't. Few stories and games have left quite as a profound effect on me as the twist and reveals from Pillars of Eternity 1. It's a title that's hard to get into initially, with complex combat and a slow start, but by the end, you will be sitting in a dark room contemplating the meaning of life in an existential crisis. And what's more fun than that? The game itself is a love letter of sorts to the great RPGs of old like Baldur's Gate, Planescape Torment, and Icewind Dale. With an isometric view and large party, you take gallivanting around in a big adventure. But in my opinion, it's even better than all those that came before, because Pillars of Eternity, especially the first game, in my opinion, just has it all. A riveting storyline with unexpected twists and turns, complex and rewarding combat that gets better and better the more time you spend with it, a rich and developed custom RPG system full of haunting quests, and maybe most important of all, a setting that elevates the series to one of the best RPGs I've ever played. And more than most universes and worlds in games, Pillars of Eternity is steeped in realistic considerations. Language and how people speak, religion, politics, wars, and philosophy have all had great effects on this world. And with each person you talk to or new location you discover, the setting opens up and becomes more and more deep. Some of the developers of this series are huge history buffs, and it shows, bringing socioeconomic and political backgrounds to the forefront in a world that feels genuine and alive because of it, especially when compared to a lot of other contemporary RPGs. For example, animancy, the study of soul energy and souls, is a hot topic of debate in the games, where you will get to see all sides of the argument, whether or not it's worth doing, and make decisions for large groups of people on what will happen in the world. The ideas behind it all are awesome too, concepts like the wheel, where souls that have died return to and are reborn again, and its implications on the wider world and religious fanatics. The concepts of the gods themselves too and their meddling in human affairs, and a personal favorite of mine, ancient civilizations that hold the secrets to the universe. It's a fantasy setting that almost feels science fiction in implementation, which allows for countless interesting explorations of the human condition and philosophy. And this setting is dark too, home to quests about torture, abuse, or babies torn from the womb before birth and twisted into horrific creatures. It's a callback to the role-playing games of old, but with an improved coat of paint and truly engaging writing that is a keen focus on making us think. Pillars of Eternity 1 is a massive and sprawling RPG in all the right ways, with huge build diversity, lots of quests, an interesting open world, and most of all, moments that stick with you long after you've played. You know, there's a specific moment near the very end of this story, a huge twist of sorts that I won't spoil here, but I will say is, in my opinion, maybe the coolest twist and reveal in a game I've ever seen. As much as I love Mass Effect, for example, the twist here is even more riveting. One that places everything before it in a new context and instantly elevates the world into something so much more philosophical and cunning than it even was before. And for that reason, everyone should at least give this game a shot before they die. And if my experience is anything to go by, keep pushing through. Because when I initially tried to play this game at least 3 times, in each of these playthroughs, I grew bored quickly and confused. The beginning of the game is the worst part, but it only gets better from there. Trust me, just keep pushing forward, keep leveling up, and you will eventually see why Pillars of Eternity and its universe is one of the best in games right now. And also, why we desperately need a Pillars of Eternity 3 with the budget of a Baldur's Gate 3. Red Dead Redemption 2 is one of those games that it feels like you either love or hate. And for me, It's a weird relationship. On one hand, this game can sometimes be painfully boring, slow, and monotonous, especially at the start. I can't tell you how many times I had to try and pick this game up again because I stopped playing at some point in a playthrough. But on the other hand, when you're in the right mood, when you do finally set aside the time to dive into this Wild West and get immersed into what Rockstar has made here, then it becomes immediately clear why many regard this as the greatest game ever made. First of all, the story of Arthur Morgan is a masterpiece. In both writing and acting, full of twists and turns, but most of all at its core, a man that is rigid, yet broken inside. A story of a vagabond who was forced into brutality and anger at a young age to survive, who then must come to terms with the man he has become, with the world changing around him and the people he has hurt. Arthur's journey in Red Dead 2 is one of the most moving I've seen play out in a game, where the choices you make not only shape the man he becomes, but also, because of the powerful message, likely shape you as well. A tale about love, loss, violence, and, well, redemption. And that's why, despite how slow the gameplay is often, it's when you get to these moments later in the game and the storytelling comes front and center that it all just makes sense. Red Dead Redemption 2 isn't supposed to feel fun all the time. It isn't supposed to easily take us through the story beat by beat, quest by quest. It's meant to be hard, slow, and unforgiving, just like the setting itself. Animals and NPCs react realistically to everything you do. Towns feel immersive and genuine with lifelike animations and daily operations, and the setting is the single most realistic depiction of an open world I've ever seen, with birds that have real migration patterns, coyotes that will hunt you down in packs, and horse physics that make the real thing look like a knockoff. It's obvious even at a glance that only Rockstar and their in-house Rage engine could have made this game, with an attention to detail that other studios could only wish to achieve. So if you're in the mood for something slow and brooding, that has huge payoffs by the end in both story and presentation, an homage to the great westerns of old, then look no further than Red Dead Redemption 2. There's a reason it's one of the highest selling games of all time, because everyone needs to play it before they die. I think for most people, they would argue the biggest thing that makes video games a game is, well, the gameplay. Without an engaging loop and interesting combat or mechanics to get lost in, lots of people find gaming pointless. But I think that even with the most simple yet well-designed systems, a game can be carried completely by something else entirely. The story it tells and the lessons it teaches us all. Where, like a book, how you feel by the end of it all tells more than any moment we had with it along the way. And it's games like Citizen Sleeper that I think prove this point perfectly. A title with a gameplay loop so boring most people won't even try it, and endless walls of text you must read yourself with no voice acting in sight. And yet, despite all of this, Citizen Sleeper is still one of the few games, of which I have played many, which I think everyone should play before they die. The title tells the story of a sleeper, a digitized emulation of a human mind running inside a robotic body that slowly withers away. The sleeper we play as finds himself stuck on a space station called the Eye, where day by day we must fight to stay alive by taking on odd jobs or helping others around the station. The world you have been cast into is dark and twisted, with horrible people committing crimes all around you and mega corporations that treat human beings like cattle. Initially, it seems like all hope is lost. And to make matters worse, you are constantly being chased by assassins and mercenaries who hunt you down because of your past actions, stopping at nothing to terminate you. It's an anxiety-inducing setup for sure, but the gameplay itself consists of nothing more than rolling dice and hoping for good actions in everything you do, where day by day you make decisions on getting food, materials, and money to accomplish future tasks. I personally do like the loot, but I think a lot of you might find it somewhat boring if I'm being honest. But don't be alarmed, because the real part of Citizen Sleeper that makes it so special is the story. The characters you meet, the relationships you form, the people you choose to help or abandon, and what they choose to do to you in return. Citizen Sleeper isn't a game about being trapped on a space station. It's an experience designed around the human condition, about showing how even in the darkness, there is always light. And you know, in most games, it feels like pessimism has taken root, where societies have collapsed, aliens have invaded, and guns are being fired nonstop. But Citizen Sleeper, despite being a tragedy and story of the fall of society in its own right, focuses on the beauty of it all too. Through the NPCs you meet in-game and the stories you go on with them, we get to uncover a sense of hope that few other titles ever even think to evoke. Similar contemporaries like, say, Disco Elysium are beloved as well, but for my money, something about Citizen Sleeper and the way it tells this story is just more interesting and better. A sense that no matter how evil humanity can be, no matter how much we struggle and hurt one another, that at the core of all of us is a soul that is begging to be free, to help others, to sacrifice for the greater good, and be proud of the men and women we are. I have a full video review on this game, and I highly recommend you guys check that out for those that actually don't feel like playing based on what you've seen, because it tells a story and teaches a lesson that everyone should learn before they die, turning even the most die-hard pessimists into unrelenting optimists. And as someone who has always seen the good in people, the greatness in life, and optimism I refuse to shake, I am so happy there is finally a game out there that reminds us how awesome it is to be alive, too. Citizen Sleeper isn't the most fun you will ever have playing a game, but it damn near might be one of the most important. There are moments in this title I will never forget that through nothing more than words on a screen can bring you to tears and inspire a warmth in your heart that will extend to others around you. And well, isn't that what art, what games are all about? Not always, sometimes it's just for fun, but in the case of some special ones like Citizen Sleeper, it's about something so much more. There really is nothing out there like old school BioWare. They made some of the most formative years for many people growing up in the 90s and early 2000s, including Jade Empire, KOTOR, Mass Effect, and Dragon Age. But sadly, as of late, it feels like the studio has made nothing but failure after failure, including most recently as of writing this, the release of Dragon Age: The Veilguard. This game was so crucially bad on so many levels for me that it quite literally, in retrospect, has ruined the entire Dragon Age franchise for me. I never liked the second game all that much anyways, but I thought Inquisition had a lot of heart, and even more notably, it's Dragon Age Origins that was really special. Because despite how old this title is now, and even knowing how bad the series becomes in its final entry, Origins on its very own is so good, so impactful, that it still sits among the pantheon of games that I think everyone should play before they die. And far and away the main reason for this is the world building. Maybe more than any other game I've played, Origins immediately dials you into the experience it's trying to give. At the onset of the story, you get to choose from a variety of origins, each with hours of unique content you will only get to see on those playthroughs. And through each of these origins, you get to see exactly how the world works too. For instance, on my first playthrough as a mage, I was thrown into the Fade right away from the beginning, where I learned about demons, the Circle of Magi, and the adversarial Templar Order. Rather than being delegated to book entries in the world like most games, the main character and thrusting force of the narrative was constructed around the rules of the world and the fascinating lore. A setting where magic has actual bounds and rules, where kingdoms have come and fallen, and darkspawn, hellish brutes from the underground, have risen again to take over the world. The stakes, as in many fantasy games, are high, but through each step you take in this world, you are grounded too in the familiarity of the politics and customs you've already learned before. Every single quest, every single NPC has something interesting pertaining to the rich history on offer here, including entire towns that give you a chance to just walk around and get immersed in it all. Whereas a lot of other series tend to focus on just storylines or characters, everything in Dragon Age, to me at least, feels like it's built around lore and world building, which to me is just such a more interesting driving force when playing a game. It's funny too, because by many accounts, the combat, gameplay, and moment-to-moment systems in this title are inferior to the games that come after it. So while I personally love the combat and how deep it can get, I do understand why, especially nowadays, most people wouldn't. And yet, on the same token, that isn't what makes this game compelling anyways. It's the writing and lore that carry it for potentially the hundreds of hours you will spend with it. introductions to things like the dwarves and their massive underground cities and advanced technologies that later entries touch on and explain, but never to the same level or quality of intrigue. It goes to show that gameplay and graphics aren't what make a game eternal. It's the mature writing, imaginative world building, and dark fantasy themes that make Dragon Age Origins, even to this day, the best the series has been. And when you add on top of that the deep RPG mechanics and build crafting that will push you to your limit in hard boss fights, it's no wonder many people to this day regard Dragon Age Origins as the greatest RPG ever made. I've controversially on this channel over and over again argued that games now are better than they've ever been. That squabbles about old games being better are nothing more than ramblings of those who hate their lives now more than before, and long to be back in their younger years where anger hadn't taken hold yet. However, if there were one game that proves me wrong, it's got to be Dragon Age Origins. A title that certainly now shows its age, but nonetheless is an experience everyone should play before they die, because it not only reveals the extent to how impressive primetime BioWare was, but shows great writing and world building are the keys to making a game world everlasting. It's a shame that the series gets ruined by the Veilguard later, but this first entry shows just how much potential there truly was that now might be tainted forever. It's not often a game comes around with a totally original idea and nails it. But in the case of The Altars, a game centered around the story of one man cloning himself over and over, the premise managed to not only be unique, but wholly captivating too. Crafting an experience that no gamer should miss, with a gameplay loop that is fun and engaging, and a story that will pull at your heartstrings and make you think. When you first begin The Altars, you find yourself stranded on an alien planet, where you are the sole survivor of a crash landing and must now build to survive while you contact your home base and find a way out. The first few days are brutal, learning the systems, trying to find resources to mine, and doing everything yourself, from gathering, crafting, building, and scavenging. It feels almost hopeless, albeit beautiful with some stunning environments and a cool home base. But where things start to get very interesting is with a substance known as Rrequiem. Found only on this strange planet, you discover that through the use of your quantum computer, the liquid can generate literal copies of yourself in what are known as altars. These altars, while looking similar to you, have in their own minds lived completely different lives, making different decisions at crucial moments in your life that lead to them becoming essentially wholly different people. One might have become a builder, another a doctor, some scientist, botanist, or even a hired muscle. And over the course of the game, you must slowly spawn more and more of these copies of yourself in order to help maintain your base of operations and gather materials to craft more complex equipment. Throughout this too, you must constantly speak with a shadowy corporation with unknown intentions back home who originally sent you on the trip, all while confrontations are breaking out between your altars which you must try and resolve, as they slowly teach you more about who you are and the decisions you made along your path that resulted in the person you became. In a lot of ways, The Altars is a psychological look into what it means to be human, how our decisions affect who we become, and the ideas of love, hope, and trust. And this deepness extends to gameplay as well, where essentially you will be playing two games at once. One outside the base where you must survey the land, battle anomalies, and build mining facilities, and another inside the base, where you build a variety of rooms for work or pleasure alike, where you can mingle with the altars, set research projects, and assign tasks in what reminds me more of a Fallout Shelter minigame. The oscillating between these two becomes even more fascinating too when you add on the time element, wherein every day you must make vital decisions on what to accomplish since you only have so much time before it's night and radiation comes out and you need sleep. Altars' mood will affect how long and hard they work, and the gameplay essentially becomes a balancing act of staying alive, maintaining resources, keeping altars happy, and planning ahead. It's an addictive loop that's quite cozy, especially after a while, but truly, it's the heart of this game, and the story it tells that will leave the biggest mark. In the later acts, big reveals start to happen that finally show you a little bit of what's going on. And because of how much choice and consequence there is in the game, it's ripe for multiple playthroughs that show you all the different results of your actions. In fact, there's even a system in game that allows you to see the previous choices you've made in other saves That way, you can make new ones going forward and see how they result. And honestly, overall, I was just really surprised by not only how fun, but moving the altars is. It's a game that essentially came out of nowhere and even now gets almost no recognition when truly everyone should be giving it a shot. Especially when you consider maybe my single favorite part about this entire game are the movies, which you can find hidden in each zone, after which you can watch them with your altars in the social room that you can build. These movies, without exaggeration, are some of the funniest skits I have ever seen in a game. Whereas most of the time comedy in games is either pretty cringe or just gets a small chuckle out of me, these movies, let me tell you, these movies had me genuinely smiling and laughing uncontrollably sitting by myself on the couch. Even if this game doesn't look up your alley at first, get far enough into the first act to find your first movie, build the social room, and even just this should carry you to the end, knowing that there's a bunch more out there to find. The Altars deserves a lot more love than I've seen it get so far, and I hope this recommendation can convince a couple of you to at least give it a shot. For as much love as Skyrim seems to get, I have a confession to make. I've always thought, even on release when I was a kid, that Skyrim is extremely overrated. I find the quests and writing laughably mundane, the mechanics and RPG systems trivial, and the choice and consequence non-existent, which in an RPG, for me at least, is tragic and a death sentence. And for that reason, I've always been a proponent of the idea that Skyrim, the Elder Scrolls, and even Fallout largely are quite overrated and overstated, which is pretty ironic coming from someone that's made so many videos on them on this channel. I like Fallout 4's combat and crafting, but its writing is just okay. I love Skyrim's music and ambiance, but as I just mentioned, the rest kinda sucks. And really, almost every Bethesda game is like this for me. Fallout 3 has a compelling setting, but a lot of it's pretty boring. Morrowind is absolutely fantastic until you have to fight a slug for 10 minutes with your sword missing every swing, and even Fallout New Vegas, a game made by a completely different company but in the same vein, I find fantastic in many ways, yet all housed in a setting I just can't like. The drab sand and openness of the Mojave just isn't my thing. However, there is one what we can call Scrolls-like game out there that I do find amazing. A game that shows why this genre can be so cool, and one that everyone should play before they die. My first Bethesda game ever, The Elder Scrolls Oblivion. Just like the other Scrolls-like on offer here, the title too has many issues, including samey dungeons, a lack of varied voice acting, and Oblivion gates that make you want to cry whenever you see one. But beneath all of these flaws is an experience unlike anything else out there. First of all, Oblivion has a heavy reliance on a system known as Radiant AI. At the time, Bethesda turned this artificial intelligence system in its game up to 11, and allowed NPCs to all have their own routines and schedules, forcing them to bump into one another out in the open world and start entire conversations about local gossip or big moments that have happened in the main questline. It makes the world feel so alive and lived in, where you can simply walk around town and see people talking, trading, or even randomly starting to fight one another, and everything each NPC does is realistically reacted to by every other NPC. It's a beautiful chain of events that can happen, albeit being pretty wonky at times, but that only adds to the charm of this game. Oblivion feels like a real adventure, one where each town is unique and full of life, every bit of wildlife is pristine, and it's all housed in a setting that comes across as whimsical and almost happy, a stark contrast to the boring gray and white tones of, say, Skyrim or other medieval fantasy RPGs since the inception of Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings. I personally prefer the art style of Oblivion so much more, because it still retains the harshness too, with some of the most memorable Bethesda questlines of all time, including the Dark Brotherhood, Thieves Guild, and the Shivering Isles DLC. The writing in Oblivion is miles better than any of the other modern Bethesda titles as well, and it shows just how much better this formula is when you have some competent world building and lore behind it. The Elder Scrolls and Fallout have amazing worlds. That's the real reason I like making videos. But actually playing the games themselves, to me at least, is just a constant reminder of how much Bethesda is letting down the IPs that they now own. When I play something like Skyrim or Starfield, I literally roll my eyes at how little thought goes into many of the quest encounters and world building. Things just don't make sense the more you think about them. But in Oblivion at least, it's easier to suspend your disbelief. Towns and cities feel like actual places, NPCs have believable motives, and quests are designed in ways that allow for player expression, like murder mysteries where you must find the killer, or paintings that send you into entirely new realities. To me, Oblivion is the perfect example of what the Scrolls formula should aim to be. And while I do appreciate, say, Skyrim's moment-to-moment exploration way more, none of that matters without memorable writing and quests like that from Oblivion, mixed in with more thought-provoking gameplay and RPG systems. In fact, another game that I think actually did this quite well and proves the point I think I'm trying to make is Tainted Grail: The Fall of Avalon, a recent indie Scrolls-like game that also shows how fun this formula is when you have competent writing and a focus on deep RPG systems and immersive sim design. But at the risk of spending an hour talking about why I think that game's great too, I'll just say this. For my money, Oblivion reigns as the king of this open world exploration formula. One that certainly has so much to be improved upon, but should be played by just about everyone because not only is it extremely fun and engaging, but it's a reminder of what made the Elder Scrolls series so special for so many people in the first place. Funnily enough too, Morrowind is even better in many accounts here, with some truly otherworldly and amazing writing and world building, but its systems and design are just so old now that I don't think I could recommend it for everyone to play. It takes a lot of effort to fall in love with that game now, while Oblivion, especially with the remaster, is instantly fantastic. With so many amazing fantasy and science fiction universes out there, it's practically impossible for any one human being to become immersed in all of them. And because of that, there will always be certain games and worlds that escape us, settings that we likely would love, but likely will never get the time to check out. For me, one of these worlds is Warhammer 40k, a backdrop I was always fascinated with, but never got the time to actually enjoy. That is, until our next game that everyone should play before they die. Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader. For those of you who haven't tried this hardcore traditional CRPG from Owlcat Games, on the surface it seems fairly archaic. Little voice acting, an isometric perspective, and menus that look more like Excel spreadsheets than most game UIs. But that's because what Rogue Trader lacks in pure presentation when compared to, say, some of its peers like Baldur's Gate 3, it makes up for with raw depth and quality. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I think that if Rogue Trader had the same level of budget for cutscenes, animation, and voice acting as Baldur's Gate 3, it would be the much better story. And on top of that, build variety and diversity is wide and interesting, allowing for tons of ways to play and a huge cast of characters that are all unique, many times bringing lots more conflict to the game's setting. And speaking of setting, it's exactly what elevates this title so much. Warhammer 40k is full of fascinating lore and ancient wars, politics, religion, slavery, and technological theocracies that battle between faith and reason. In Rogue Trader, you get to take the reins of, well, a rogue trader, a powerful individual granted the warrant of trade by the Emperor, allowing them to explore, conquer, and trade in uncharted regions of space beyond the direct control of the Imperium. The fantasy of essentially being a king that can decide the fates of entire planets and the aliens on them is so addictive, and the scale is breathtaking. In many other RPGs, finding a single gun might be a big moment for looting, but in Rogue Trader, you will be picking up hundreds of weapons and armor on each mission, quickly sending them back to your ship to trade with entire empires for tons and tons of goods. An RPG that feels like it is truly on a galactic scale, that gives you the opportunity to truly be a badass. And this feeling extends to combat too, where the turn-based tactics are fantastic. In fact, many fights, especially in the later half of the game, can be quite challenging, especially if you don't know what you're doing, where positioning and gear can become vital. The game is brutal too, with combat full of dismembering and blood, and a main storyline that doesn't hold any punches, showing you the worst that this universe has to offer and the horror that inflicts people every day here constantly. For example, on your massive capital ship, a constant side story throughout the narrative is about the lower rings of society. Thousands of people in the bowels of your machine who toil and slave away in the engine rooms where the heat can melt the skin clean off their bodies. or cults that have sprung up, worshipping magical forces and fighting against enemies that can quite literally steal the bodies of their foes. There is just so much to love about the universe of Rogue Trader. After all, Warhammer 40k has been going on for decades now, and that means the setting is ripe with interesting things to explore. And as a sucker for world building and dark themes and sci-fi settings like this, I just couldn't get enough of Rogue Trader. It single-handedly made me fall in love with the setting, something other Warhammer games couldn't do, and I'm so thankful for that. Because usually when I see Warhammer, it has such a focus on, well, the war. But Rogue Trader is more methodical, more introspective, giving new people a better entry point into the universe, showing how brutal it can be without being nothing more than shooting and aliens. It's one of the best RPGs I've ever played, with over 100 hours of content, including riveting quests, lots of choice and consequence, extreme build variety, and a setting that is practically impossible not to fall utterly in love with once you begin to immerse yourself. I pray one day Owlcat will get the budget they need to make a Warhammer 40k RPG on the same level as Baldur's Gate 3, because I think that could be something really special that would make the IP explode. But in the meantime, I can't wait to try the upcoming Dark Heresy and Expanse games coming from Owlcat next. If you've been involved in gaming and gaming content for any amount of time, it's almost impossible you haven't heard of Outer Wilds. And that's because The Outer Wilds is an indie game that practically everyone seems to love. A narrative about a sun that goes supernova every 22 minutes, where in that time you must try and discover secrets or unlock hidden passageways throughout the universe, all in a bid to figure out what's going on and how to stop it. And with each failure, you awake again, around the campfire, ready to do it over. But this time, armed with the most potent weapon of all, knowledge. It's a fascinating concept in general, and leads to a lot of interesting gameplay mechanics and moments. But funnily enough, I don't actually adore this game quite as much as many others. I think it's largely in many ways overstated, with too many people exaggerating how good it can be often. Personally, I think it would have benefited a lot more from open-ended design principles, rather than just puzzle pieces you have to fit together. And yet, as I say that, there still is something about this title. An experience it can potentially give us that is unforgettable. And for that reason, I want to make the argument that even if you play it at the wrong period in your life like I did, that even the chance that you play it at the right moment when it will speak to you more closely makes it the type of game everyone should play before they die. Because more than anything, Outer Wilds is an experience rather than a game. A gameplay loop that at first can be frustrating or confusing, but as you slowly piece together everything you need to do, is awe-inspiring in what it does and how cool the true ending is. Without giving any specific story spoilers away, the moment-to-moment in this game essentially comes down to flying from planet to planet trying to make certain things happen. For example, on one planet the entire surface may be covered in a sea full of tornadoes that reach into the sky. Another has its sand being ripped off of its shell to another planet entirely in real time, and some locations even house anomalies, like quantum objects that disappear the second you look away. The genius of this loop comes from that 22-minute timer, because each and every day, actions carry out the same way. That planet that is being stripped of all of its sand, at the same time, has a hidden door in a valley that opens up at the exact same moment over and over. And slowly using this to your advantage to learn more, you can piece by piece figure out how to do more complex things. One of my favorite examples of this comes from a comet that as time goes on moves closer and closer to the sun, which causes its frozen ice to melt, and if you make your way inside during the melting process before it gets too hot outside, you can find something special. Things like this are what the Outer Wilds is all about, but its true crowning achievement in it all is also how it makes you think. Throughout your travels, you will find notes from those who have come before you and unravel the narrative of a universe that dies every 22 minutes. It's a story about hope, about belief in a force that makes us eternally suffer, and in its final moments reveals some truly thought-provoking revelations that remind us how great the human spirit can be. I've touched on exactly why I love the philosophy of this game, something you guys can check out in some of my philosophy videos if you're interested, but all I will say here is that The Outer Wilds manages to capture a sense of wonder and awe that few games do, despite the fact that I'm not actually in love with it. which is even more impressive considering how small the team was that worked on this game as well. So while for me this title didn't hit as hard as it could have, due to the nitpicks I had regarding its design not being immersive simmy enough, and due to the fact that I played it when I was hoping for something more fast-paced in my life, I still think it's one of those games that everyone should play before they die. Because I think for most of you, unlike me, there is a journey on offer here that likely will have you thinking about it long after you've finished. One of my favorite things about having a channel like this is getting the ability to shout out games or narratives I think deserve so much more. Titles that for whatever reason never reached the level of recognition or fame I think they always deserved. And in terms of things like this, one of the first that always comes to my mind is an RPG that every gamer needs to try at least once before they die. One that has everything an RPG lover could ever want, and even more. Wasteland 3. Set in the harsh and frozen post-apocalyptic Colorado, you take the reins of a desert ranger, venturing into this new territory to rebuild civilization after a plea for help. It's a fairly straightforward setup, but it does the job, and the real quality of this game comes across less from just the setting and more from the moment-to-moment actions. The writing is witty and funny, with tons of choices to make in dialogue that can drastically affect quests in the main story. Some narratives revolve around crazy scientists and their wacky experiments, while others focus on more serious topics of murder or abuse, while also maintaining the jovial nature the series is known for. More than a lot of other deep sea RPGs as well, Wasteland 3 has a keen focus on comedy. It feels like every character is either hilarious or unforgettable, with voice acting that comes across like everyone in the booth was just having a good time. And really, that's what Wasteland 3 is all about, having a good time. It's a title that never takes itself too seriously, and because of that, allows for wacky situations, like an anarcho-communist commune of robots who seek to find peace with humanity, who you can choose to either help or eliminate entirely. There are so many memorable things like this in the game too, which are all accentuated by the fantastic turn-based combat. In fact, this is actually one of the original games that got me into turn-based RPGs in the first place, even before Baldur's Gate 3. And it has some really fun and fantastical encounters, full of robots that fill the entire size of your screen, or endless waves of enemies that make you actually plan ahead and think. The harder difficulties in this game are no joke, especially if you're going a melee build like I tried to do, and if you don't know the systems, you will be struggling along the way. So without a doubt, Wasteland 3 is one of the best RPGs I've ever played, with genuinely funny writing, engaging combat, and deep and crunchy RPG systems and consequences for choices that make replayability a must. I know I often mention RPGs like Baldur's Gate 3, Rogue Trader, and Dragon Age Origins as some of the best. But it's important we don't forget the dark horse in the corner, which found its own lane and was all the better for it. If you haven't already, play Wasteland 3 before you die and experience what the recent Fallout games should have been. The story of Amicia and Hugo from Plague Tale is one of the most moving that I almost never see people talk about. Often, games like The Last of Us or God of War are brought up and described as amazing stories of father or mother-like figures and their child. But in my opinion, Plague Tale, and more specifically Rrequiem, is in many ways the better version of this. And because of that, I think it's a game that everyone should play before they die. First of all, the scenes in the game are breathtaking. Set in medieval France, Rrequiem sees you moving from bustling towns to scenic woodlands, all the way to alien underground hellscapes that inspire fear. And in each of these, you get the time to really explore and take it all in. More so than the first game, while the narrative is still primarily linear, there are many sections in the environment with open-ended levels, where you can choose to sneak past the guards or try to fight your way through everything. But just like the first game as well, combat here is just fine. For the most part, it feels pretty on rails, with a lot of different weapons or gadgets to use for sure, but none of them actually are all that fun compared to some of the competition. Where Rrequiem does shine though, and the reason I think everyone should play it, is the story. Amicia and Hugo's bond is unlike anything else I've seen in games, not only feeling raw and gritty, but passionate as well. A sister who will stop at nothing to defend her little brother, and a young boy stricken with an ailment that forces him to grow up quicker than any child should. There are scenes of horror and heroism alike, all centered around a family who has been torn apart and must rebuild the pieces. As much as I do enjoy the stories of, say, Joel and Ellie in The Last of Us or Kratos in God of War, there's just something about Amicia and Hugo that feels more real, more grounded, and more genuine. The voice acting, cinematography, and writing sells it as well, along with an awesome soundtrack that I think is also very underrated. It's one of those games that I'm not sure everyone who plays will love, but anyone should at least give it a shot because of how transformative the game can be if you're in the mood for it. So if you like heartwarming and tragic tales alike about honor, duty, and family, don't miss out on Plague Tale, especially Rrequiem. I love games with deep philosophical themes or cool ideas that make you think. And if you haven't noticed already, a lot of my picks for games everyone should play before they die center around this love. Whereas most people tend to like good gameplay first and foremost and hope for a good story secondarily, I'm the exact opposite. So for my next game everyone should play before they die, it's yet another psychological experience that will keep you on the edge of your seat from beginning to end, with countless hours of YouTube gaming essays to binge afterwards. Bioshock Infinite. Funnily enough, I'm actually not a fan of the first Bioshock game. I only played it after playing Prey, and sorry guys, I'm just going to be completely honest, Prey is Bioshock 1 but better in literally every single way. So playing Bioshock 1 after it makes it a pretty sour experience. I like the ideas of Rapture and the cool twists, but the gameplay and design is painful, and the moment-to-moment storytelling just doesn't reach the heights, for me at least, of say Bioshock Infinite. Even with the infamous twist. I know. Ironically though, Infinite is much more controversial than the first and second game it seems, being adored by some and hated by others. But as you can see, I fall squarely into the former. Even from the moment you step foot into the world of Columbia, a flying city in the sky, you will be taken aback by the scenery and iconography. On the surface, Columbia is pristine and beautiful, with happy children and families walking the streets and beautiful colors everywhere. But the more you dig into this facade, the more you realize the harsh edges around everywhere. The themes of slavery and abuse, of crime and punishment. From the ground up, the world and main story are meant to not only evoke different feelings in us, but ask philosophical questions with parallels to humanity as well. For example, while soaring through the sky to your next destination, you might come across posters depicting scenes of America overpowering the indigenous population, or religious texts and biblical adjacent verses screamed by villains mid-combat. And to top it all off, at the center of this narrative too is a very scientific approach to storytelling, touching on parallel universes, quantum entanglement, and an ending that will blow your mind and have you scrambling to pick up the pieces. Going back to this game now, some things surely feel a little dated, like the combat for instance, but I do think that still at its core, Bioshock Infinite tells a powerful and unique story that's practically begging to be played by all gamers out there. I can't even think of any other games that structure their story in quite the same way, and it's one of those titles that has some moments, specifically a quieter one with a guitar that I'm a sucker for, that will last with you for quite a long time. And now with the next Bioshock title presumably being worked on as of writing this video, it might be a good time to go back and remember what made this series so great in the first place. A series that rather than just being fun, makes you think too. I've always been a sucker for games with huge twists in the narrative, titles that keep you on the edge of your seat the entire playthrough and produce moments that you never see coming, or main stories where the entire game is flipped on its head over and over again. Personally, I think everyone owes it to themselves to play a game like this at least once in their lives, something like say Doki Doki Literature Club, Me-Side, Undertale, or Soma. But in my opinion, out of all of these games that hold so many secrets, none do it better than Inscryption. A title you should look up absolutely nothing about that I promise will be worth it in the end. In fact, fearing I would spoil too much even diving into what this game is about at all I can say is that it's based around a card game mechanic, one of my favorites in games. But even if you usually aren't into that genre, just trust me, don't listen to any reviews, don't watch any more gameplay, and don't even look up what this game is about at all. More than any other game on this list, it excels if you go in blind, and you will be happy you did when you reach certain moments that to this day are the most unexpected and crazy I've ever seen pulled off in a video game. Take my word for it, and play Inscryption before you die. I know this is a short section, but you'll thank me for it later. As someone that usually finds medieval settings and premises too mundane and lacking for full game playthroughs, the next pick on my list of titles everyone should play before they die might come as a surprise. A murder mystery set in the fictional 16th century Bavarian town of Tassing that puts us in the reigns of Andreas Mahler, a journeyman artist who must help a town and clergy remain sane with no voice acting or what most people would call gameplay to speak of. You see, Pentiment is a passion project from Josh Sawyer, the man behind many beloved RPGs like Fallout New Vegas. But while most of his other games have big budgets and teams, Pentiment is a labor of love created by only 13 individuals. This means usual staples like voice acting, detailed 3D animations, and hundreds of hours of content we know and love from Obsidian is absent. But in its place is something just as magical. Every day, you awaken your home in this small town and fraternize with the locals, going to church, eating around the dinner table, and tending to the animals on the farm. Each and every NPC has a believable personality and cadence that comes through even only in text. And accompanying each of them are meticulously drawn works of 16th century art and iconography that really sell you being involved in this time period. Similar to other titles on this list as well, there is a time element on offer here in Pentiment where every day you must decide on the things you will do and the objectives you want to accomplish, which makes decision making crucial to success. Earlier on in the story, a murder occurs, and in order to solve it and prevent Tassing from falling into utter ruin, you must meet and question all the locals, learn about what they do every day, and get immersed into the lives of everyday people hundreds of years ago. And you know, a lot of games do try to include historical elements or accuracy, because seeing things like that can be really interesting. But few pull it off in such a perfect way like Pentiment does, paying homage to the different languages of the time, religious customs, dinner routines, and politics. In fact, playing the game in many ways is a fantastic introduction to the time period, and shows just how great games can be at teaching history when done to this level of quality. It's one thing reading about how Bavaria would have been during this time period, but actually getting to play as someone living the life they would have back then kind of sells the whole illusion. For example, the rooms and houses are designed based on real historical towns, and every meal you have in-game has lore about the food, culture, and even how grace was said at the table. However, none of this would make Pentiment a game everyone should play if it didn't have something that made it fun. And here is where, in my personal opinion, the game really starts to take its hold. You see, Pentiment doesn't have much traditional gameplay like many other titles with shooting or melee buttons, but what it does have is fantastic writing. Simply sitting back and taking in the sights while you discuss the meaning of God with a local hermit is the type of thing that works with good writing. And the writing extends to the murder mystery here as well, which has many twists and turns that will keep you on the edge of your seat until the final day. In fact, the main narrative of the game actually takes place over many years, so choices you make early on can have a drastic effect on the town and its people later, where if you accuse the wrong person, they will be hanged and the town changed for the worse. And even though the story of Pentiment is by no means as heroic or bombastic as most RPGs, it still somehow packs an even greater punch. The type where you will be invested in the lives of these people in this small town and grow a greater and greater appreciation for the time period on offer. And if I had to guess, this is exactly the type of experience Pentiment was aiming for. One that, while quite niche in a lot of ways, and on the surface at times even boring and slow, is a title I think everyone should play because it has so much to offer when you give it the time of day. While I know most people would pick a different Josh Sawyer project, like say Fallout New Vegas to put on this list, or another game that's similar like Disco Elysium, I just personally found Pentiment to be the more interesting between the three. I love Fallout New Vegas in certain ways, but I don't like the setting. And while Disco Elysium has some truly breathtaking moments, I do just think a lot of it's boring, too drab, and pessimistic. If there's one game that I think most people would agree everyone should play before they die, it's got to be Subnautica, a title that takes place almost entirely underwater and is all the better for it. But you see, it's not just being underwater that makes Subnautica special, it's how amazing that underwater world is. In the more shallow portions, you can find lush coral reefs full of plant and animal life, teeming with color and the sun refracting off the water. These parts of the game are more calm and serene, allowing for easy base creation and exploration into neighboring realms like the Kelp Forest, a sea of never-ending vines which reach into the sky with ample spots to hide. And there really is just something about being inside the universe and world of Subnautica that feels mesmerizing. The music, the ambiance, and most of all, the dread. Because you see, as you make your way deeper and deeper into the water, you will find pitch black horror, screeches from monsters the size of buildings, and constant fear of the unknown. While in its opening moments Subnautica seems to be a more relaxed game, it's this sense of relaxation mixed with the fear that makes the experience so unforgettable. There really is nothing like that first playthrough of especially the first game, where everything is so alien and foreign. And yet the reward of exploration and discovery is so great, it forces you forward even into the depths of hell. Subnautica does a great job of biome diversity too, with tons of places to visit, all with their own unique flair, so much so that I made an entire video on each one of them if you guys are interested. It's a living, breathing ecosystem, one where you can just sit back, make a base, and watch predators hunt prey or prey hide in the small alcoves of the local plant life. Each and every bit of this flora and fauna can be studied too, and it all comes together to make Subnautica feel alive. And honestly, everyone needs to play this game just because of how innovative it is as well. There are no other survival games, or really games in general, on the market quite like it. And there's a reason the fan base has grown so large and devoted. The mystery of discovering what's hiding in the ocean, the horrifying noises in the deep, or the simple question of what's out there. For my money, Subnautica is the best survival game ever made, and one that will make you appreciate a game that has essentially no combat, yet still is more tense than most others out there. If you haven't already, do yourself a favor and play one of the most innovative and memorable games of the past few decades. Few games are as strange and complex as a Kojima title. But sometimes, that weirdness too can be home to a beauty all to itself. And in the case of Death Stranding 2, there is a beauty unlike anything else. The type of game that everyone should play before they die. You know, I've always been a fan of this series. Despite how boring and divisive it can be at times, doing nothing more than walking from one location to the next trying not to fall over, but there really is just a certain serenity and joy falling into the trance that experience offers. And Death Stranding 2, well, it's more of the first game, but just better in almost every way. Environments are stunning and photorealistic at times, accompanied by sweeping and evocative music tracks that will spark something in your soul. Combat is much improved with countless gadgets and upgrades that you can get to make encounters more fun and interesting, and the story is easier to follow with some amazing payoffs by the end. Overall, it's just a really good and also different type of game. But where Death Stranding 2 really excels specifically is the art. Those slower moments when you're walking through a completely new environment and you're taken aback by what's happening around you as a swell of music envelops you completely. One moment you will be drenched in fear, holding your breath as you walk through a BT-infested zone covered in a red mist, and the next, coddled by the serenity of a sweeping ocean. It's a perfect example of how to use music in games to elevate the experience tenfold as well. And I honestly think using music in this way is one of the most overlooked things most studios are not doing that wouldn't even be hard and make their games so much better. But regardless, impressively enough as well, the rules and world building of this place never take a back seat either. As strange and otherworldly as things can get in Death Stranding, they all make sense in the context of the world. And it feels like the creators behind the game took great care in making sure every step you took mattered and made sense in its own little way. And really, Death Stranding 2 is just a perfect example of what games can be. Not every game has to be like Call of Duty or put into a specific gameplay-focused box. Not every title has to be a massive open world or a corridor shooter. Not every experience has to be a team-based arena shooter. Not every online game has to be an arena-based ROM. Games are a medium too that excels in the weird. In ideas like being a delivery man who must make his way across an alien environment full of secrets. This title too is so much better at onboarding you into the gameplay quickly. Whereas the first title felt like it took forever to get going, and by the time it did, many people were too tired to care, this game holds no punches and immediately starts throwing you into the deep end. And the gameplay loop, as eccentric as it is really fun, where it's easy to get addicted and fall into the loop of doing multiple deliveries over and over again in order to upgrade and find new equipment that you can get out into the field in and use. So while Death Stranding, even in its second and much improved incarnation, is not for everyone, I think that everybody at least owes it to themselves to try this second installment, which shows us that games are their most compelling when guns aren't even being fired or swords swung. They are at their most compelling when they speak to us at an intellectual and artistic level, making us feel things and contemplate ideas or just reminisce on the spectacles we've been through. I love games because I think they're the best form of art out there, and Death Stranding 2, well, it proves it. In true cliche fashion, I've saved the best for last, because as any of you who have watched my channel for some time know, I think that without a doubt, Cyberpunk 2077 is the greatest game ever made, and one that every single person needs to play before they die. But you see, the main reason for this doesn't come from the fast-paced and frenetic combat or the awe-inspiring graphics and architecture, all of which certainly adds to an amazing product. The main reason everyone needs to play this game before they die is because of the message, the meaning behind the beautiful facade. Every character you meet in this narrative is complex and introspective, hiding harrowing pasts and bombastic personalities, and with every quest and moment you go through with them, a bond is formed more and more. What makes these bonds so special in Cyberpunk, though, is in large part due to the presentation. While people speak to you, you can look around and walk. Animations present as real with facial capture and lip syncing that is believable instantly. And there is a world on offer here that breathes verisimilitude, the appearance of being true and real. The way characters speak using words like choom or delta doesn't come across as out of place. It's genuine to this world and sold so well that I've heard people use cyberpunk slang in real life and it just works. The immersion in the game is unmatched. And that's not even bringing up the fact that this game on a high-end PC with max ray tracing and high FPS is a surreal event, with many scenes, especially in the Dogtown DLC, that arguably look better than real life. On top of this immersive template too is a huge amount of build variety, including going in guns blazing, running around like a cyber ninja with your sword out, and being a hacker who hides in the shadows, blowing off people's heads with nothing more than a thought. I still can't believe this is the studio's first attempt at a first-person shooter due to the fact that it's so high quality. And when you mix that in with fun driving and sneaking sections, it's hard not to love the moment-to-moment gameplay on offer as well. But as I stated before, it's the writing, the world that makes Cyberpunk 2077 special, not just the gameplay. Even on release, when everyone was hating on this title, I remember just being in awe. The city lights at night, dense and crowded downtown areas with hundreds of NPCs and dozens of shops to go into, or elevators that take you to the upper levels where you can walk freely around and just take it all in. Because honestly, there's a lot to take in. For example, the architecture of Night City is far and away, not even close, the best city in a video game of all time. Buildings feel massive and impressive, but also true to the setting, telling a story all to their own. And in a way, Night City becomes the main character, one that molds and shapes everyone within it. That molding is important too because the characters in the game are immaculate, like Judy, Panam, Jackie, and Johnny. Each tragic in their own right and perfectly acted to bring some sort of emotion to every scene we so seldom get to see in other games. There are specific moments with, say, Judy, Panam, and Johnny that will genuinely shape you as a person and bring forth emotions in yourself that you didn't even know you had. Seeing a man with no friends confide in you, in regret for the past actions he has taken, in regret for who he was before. Or a woman falling into your arms crying, knowing she has lost the last thing she held so close. Moments like these are what makes Cyberpunk 2077 my favorite game of all time. The rawness, the cinematic flair, the times where you feel like a badass, quickly followed by a piercing hole being flung through your heart. The endings in this game show this idea perfectly too, and while I won't spoil them for you here, I can say that without a doubt, the message behind the finale of this game is so powerful it made me reevaluate even my own life. And some of the final moments in a few specific scenes are so enlightening that for the first time in my life, when I finished the game, a genuine feeling of sadness and beauty came over me where I just sat in front of a blank screen for a while, thinking. Cyberpunk 2077 is a perfect example of why video games are special, of what they can do as a medium of art to transcend simply being fun. A game with heart, action, passion, and soul. So if there's any single game I think that everyone has to play before they die, just for the fact that no others have quite reached its heights, it has to be Cyberpunk 2077. That's why even on release, I was making videos begging for people to play, arguing with thousands of others that the experience was something amazing even when people were hating on it. The core of this game is true art, and I'm happy to see that the world finally agrees. So if you haven't played yet, that's the first thing you should do. To me, games are more than just fun distractions or meaningless time wasters. To me, games are art for learning lessons, for experiencing beauty, or opening our minds to what's out there. And it's for this reason exactly that every year or so I make a video like this, not only to update you guys on new games you should all play, but to revisit some of my favorites and remember what made them great. Whether that be addictive gameplay or a riveting story, there are so many games out there that have left a mark on me and stuck in my psyche even long after I finished them. And hopefully some of you who have watched the video today found a new title you either have never heard of or never gave a shot, and maybe that game can become something special for you too. As always, thank you all very much for watching. I appreciate all the support. And if you want videos like this earlier than everyone else, check out the membership program for only $1 a month, or share this video with people you think would benefit from playing some of these games too. Until next time.